Is HPP a dirty word? Let's talk about it. So what is HPP? HPP stands for high pressure processing, and it is a food safety step that we use with our foods.
It's essentially taking foods that could contain E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria and processing them at 87,000 psi for 180 seconds in our case. And that pressure essentially inactivates all of those pathogens in the food, but doesn't apply any heat, so it stays in a raw food state.
At Green Juju, we really value quality and safety when it comes to our products. Food safety starts with sourcing quality proteins, having a clean facility, and then we use HPP as our final step in ensuring that there's no pathogens in our food. After that, we then test everything to ensure that our food safety steps all worked, and then we hold the product until we get those results. So nothing's released from our facility until we have a test result saying that it is cleared of the 3 common pathogens that we are concerned with. We know that dogs and cats can tolerate pathogens in a way that humans can't, but we believe that just because they can doesn't mean that they should. Whenever their body is dealing with that type of pathogen, it means their body's not focusing on another function it should be doing.
And if you look at microbiome tests for dogs and cats, just generally, most sick animals have buildup of pathogens, most commonly E. coli in the gut. And so we would rather avoid that altogether and keep their body in a healthier state.
We use HPP in our freeze-dried and frozen recipes, anything that has ground meat in it, as a way to mitigate pathogens and make sure that our food is safe for not only pets, but also for humans handling the food at home. When we decided to make a food, we evaluated our options for food safety very thoroughly. And we honestly were okay with not making a food if we didn't like the options that were out there. We did a really deep dive on HPP. We learned all about it, and we decided that this is actually a really innocuous and great way to make sure that we're making safe food. So let's be honest, there's a lot of information out there about HPP, and we want to debunk some of those myths. Some of them were actually started by this guy over here.
I was actually one of the main pieces of information against HPP in the past, and I myself took a 2-year journey talking to PhDs in the technology, going to conferences, looking at the actual research, and we organically came to the conclusion that we reached, and that is practicing science, because when you're presented with new information, if you tend to ignore it because you want something to be true or not want something to be true, that's not science, and that science tends to guide us here at Green Juju. So it's been a very interesting journey, to say the least.
Myth number 1, if we use HPP, the food is no longer raw.
So raw food is food that has not been heat processed. I was under the impression for many years that that much pressure created the amount of heat needed to cook the food, essentially. But that was actually the first part of my journey, where I was actually in an HPP facility and I saw the temperature gauge move from 41 to 43 degrees, not applying any kind of heat to cook the food. And so our HPP food is not heat processed and is in its raw food state.
Myth number 2, it destroys the enzymes in the food.
There's very good science to show that the enzyme activity is at max affected by 10%, but generally not affected at all. So that is just a straight myth that we can debunk through science.
Myth number 3, HPP affects the digestibility of the food.
In digestibility studies, high pressure processed food and non-high pressure processed food are exactly the same digestibility. So that's not affected at all.
Myth number 4, HPP destroys good bacteria.
I think it's important to clarify right off the bat that there are no, quote, good bacteria in raw meat, because people classify good bacteria as probiotics. And so raw meat is going to contain what's called background microflora, which is not necessarily probiotic in nature. But we do know through science and through studies done on actual raw pet food that that background flora does survive that process, and that HPP is very good at inactivating pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella, and Listeria, but not inactivating all of the background flora that comes in raw meat generally.
Myth number 5, HPP degrades the vitamins and minerals in the food.
So there are actually only 3 nutrients that are affected in any real way by HPP, and that is vitamin A and 2 B vitamins can be affected by up to 20%. Now, this is a very easy problem to fix through formulation. All of ours are much, much higher than that 20% in those 2 B vitamins and vitamin A. However, the other interesting part about this, and I've heard this described as a margin of error, but I would disagree with that. So in 2 separate sets of data, 67% of the nutrients or higher actually tested higher in nutrients after they were HPP'd. And we don't know why this is exactly, but that's just what the data says. So what that shows us is they're either slightly more bioavailable, but we know for sure that they're at least the same. And so we know that the nutrient profile is exactly where you want it to be, even when the food has been HPP'd.
Myth number 6, HPP is done in plastic and therefore pushes plastic into the food and contaminates it.
This is a really interesting one. I hear this and I see this referenced in that there was plastic in HPP'd food, and there's transference there. However, what the study actually found was that there was no more transference than food that was not HPP'd and was also in plastic. So that was just as a result of food being in plastic in general. So that shows you that HPP does not necessarily push plastic into the food. The bottom line is that food that has been high pressure processed is raw, safe, and nutritious, and we have had amazing health outcomes all over the country with animals that have eaten this food.
In fact, a lot of human products that we consume, like salsa or guacamole or hummus or fresh juices that we all think of as very healthy, fresh, raw products, all of them go through high pressure processing for our safety. And that's how it's marketed to us, is that it's high pressure processed for our safety. And we are doing the same thing for our pets.